This is a conversation with Ryan Kelly, who is the General Manager of the Association for Manufacturing Technology, or AMT, at their San Francisco Tech Lab. Did you know that in the US there are 500,000 job openings in manufacturing? To me, it seems that this is the primary problem that AMT is working to solve, and they're working to solve it in a number of ways. They host the largest manufacturing technology trade show in North America, called IMTS, to help facilitate connections and to help people find manufacturing technology solutions. They also work to increase the supply of people in manufacturing by trying to inspire young people to make their careers in manufacturing and by helping create curriculums for community colleges to get people into skilled trade work. As you might expect, they're also interested in technology, such as robots, as a way to reduce the 500,000 person labor gap. And this is what Ryan is doing in Silicon Valley, trying to help startups that are making manufacturing technologies. Ryan and I talk about US manufacturing and how it has become what it is today, as well as where we should put our efforts to improve US-based manufacturing for the future. Ryan also answers tough questions like if there are 500,000 job openings in manufacturing, are most of them jobs that are so crappy no one would want them? The answer might not be what you expect. At the end of this interview, Ryan says that he recommends to anyone he knows who is unemployed or underemployed that they get a job in manufacturing. He says jobs in manufacturing pay well and are great for tech-savvy people who are also problem solvers. This is different than what I grew up hearing about manufacturing jobs. I found this to be a fascinating and important conversation. I plan to spend more time understanding the manufacturing space after having this conversation. I'm Audrow Nash. This is the SenseThinkX podcast. Thank you to our founding sponsor, Open Robotics. And now, here's my conversation with Ryan Kelly. Hey, Ryan. Would you introduce yourself?
Hi, of course. I'm Ryan Kelly. I am the general manager of the San Francisco Tech Lab. I work for an organization called the Association for Manufacturing Technology.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say you guys do? Or what do you do, and what's the goal of AMT?
So the AMT, the Association for Manufacturing Technology, is a trade association. It is 120 years old this year. Our members make or distribute and sell some type of solution that manufacturers use. So think FANUC, robotics, Mazak CNC machines, Autodesk's CAD software. Those would be examples of some of our member companies, but like a company like a Boeing or Ford, they wouldn't be a member. They might use lots of our member company technologies, but they themselves could not be a member. So we do what trade groups do. I mean, these are companies, and I think we've got about 700 members. Um, they pool resources and take on programs and provide offerings that help the collective membership and help move the industry forward. The thing that we're most well known for is the IMTS trade show. It's the International Manufacturing Technology Show. It is one of the largest trade shows in the world. It happens every other year in Chicago. It will be happening this year in September. And when we do that show, I think in 2018, which was the last time that we had it, about 130,000 people came. Our exhibitors sell more than $2 billion worth of their products. So it's really, so I say two, it's $10 billion worth of their products. So it's really where industry comes to shop, where they tool up, where they learn about new solutions, and it's a big deal. We're also involved with a lot of smaller events, both domestically and internationally. It is a organization that's based in the DC area. Um, lawmakers
Hmm.
and policymakers lean on AMT to help inform the policies that they're making as it relates to supporting the U.S. industrial base. That's important to us and our members because when the industrial space is strong, when the domestic economy in relation to manufacturing is strong, then our members sell more of their equipment, more of their software and solutions, and things like that. Additionally, we have a pretty big staff of experts that help our member companies and engage with industry more broadly on the topic of manufacturing and manufacturing technology. And then we have a network of international tech centers in Mexico, India, China, and Europe, where we help our member companies with their internationalization strategies. Uh, my role at AMT is sort of the manager of the San Francisco Tech Lab. It's pretty new. I've been in this role for about 3 years, and specifically, I'm working on engaging, the emerging technology community. There's a lot of companies out here in the Bay Area that you wouldn't think of as being manufacturing technology companies, but they themselves think that they sort of identify as, oh, we're going into the industrial sector, we're going into manufacturing. You can look at Google, Microsoft, NVIDIA, even Apple, and all of these companies have very distinct offerings for the industrial category, and so and numerous startups as well. So AMT is wanting to engage these types of companies, kind of the new generation, so we can help them with our same mission, which is to promote industry through the use of technology and remain relevant for another several decades.
Hmm. Now, you brought up a lot of interesting things that we'll kind of pick into during the course of this interview. To start, so you said not Ford, not any like really, really large companies. So you're typically working with smaller companies. Can you give an exact example
So
of the size?
So I think the distinction there is that, our member companies, they make a technology, they make a solution
Hmm.
that then manufacturers would employ to create their end products. So, and Ford may very well make their own manufacturing technologies that they use in their manufacturing process, but that they're not commercializing them. They're not saying, here's the Ford brand robot or something like that. If they did do that, then they would actually qualify to be a member.
Mm.
And so the distinction there is that our members make a manufacturing technology. They make a software, they make a hardware that manufacturers use to make their products. We count some of the largest manufacturing technology companies as our members.
Hmm.
So, the ones that I mentioned, like Fanuc, for example, it's the largest robot manufacturer on Earth. They're a member, their president sits on our board of directors, but the majority of our members are actually smaller companies. So we're well represented by the big players, but
Hmm.
most of our members look like what the manufacturing technology landscape looks like. They're small companies. If they're not startups now, they were startups at one time, and they're probably um, the vast majority of our members are below 500 people in their company.
Mm. Okay, so the distinction is they're often creating a product for companies to use in their own manufacturing. So it's business to business sales typically,
Yeah,
rather
that's
than
right.
like business to consumer. Okay.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I
so
would say
oh, go ahead.
no. That's it for sure. It's business to business.
Hmm. And then what kind of value are you typically providing these companies? So how do you have the trade shows and that lets them see these different technologies that are coming or that
Mhm.
might be useful for them to make things for people to make things with. But how do you think of the value you're providing them as a
Yeah,
network?
so AMT is really focused on increasing the number of sales that our member companies can generate and reducing their costs. And we do that through, our trade show is a good example of, providing this venue where hundreds of thousands of people can come and see all the latest technology from our exhibitors, and then they can see it, they can learn more about it, and they can buy it there. But we also do a lot of content generation and storytelling about what's going on in the technology landscape to make people more aware of what's happening. And then, within our organization, we have a lot of subject matter experts that engage directly with our members to help refine their go-to-market strategy. We've got actually curriculum for salespeople to learn how to be better at selling. We've got a data analytics team that can help our member companies better understand the market landscape that they're participating in, and even get pretty granular in terms of like actually developing lists of companies that they might see as sales targets. So in that sense, we've got a lot of capability that maybe larger companies would have in-house that our member companies can share in collectively, through, by being a member of our community.
Yeah. It seems to me that it's like you guys are like lubricant for the community or something. So you're making it easier for all of these processes of like finding what to do best, or knowing the right people, or finding components, or finding things to build products to be useful in their process. You're basically like an information repository that makes a lot of these processes easier. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it definitely is a network, and it's a community, and in that way, what the more nodes that we have in that network, the more useful it tends to be for most of the people. I think it's important to say that we're a nonprofit, and so all of the revenues that we generate from our trade shows and our other offerings, we reinvest into the industry.
Gotcha. So the majority of your income, is it the trade shows, the registration fees?
Certainly, it's a very successful show.
Yeah, you said it was huge.
Yeah, it's
but that's the majority of the revenue for the organization, and it is a nonprofit.
It is definitely our most successful product by a large margin. It's the thing that we're world famous for. So yeah.
And then, so with you being in Silicon Valley, how does that all fit with this? The trade show, it's I guess, what exactly are you doing in Silicon Valley for the company, managing that office?
I would call it ecosystem development.
Okay.
That we are a company with a long history, and certainly a lot of deep ties to the Midwest, and sort of where the traditional manufacturing industry is really strong. And here in the Bay Area, this is really where the emerging technology is sort of seen as, this is where it lives. And we know, or at least we have this hunch that the technology community here, and I know this from my own personal background, is very interested in manufacturing industry. It's really interested in the industrial sector. They didn't necessarily know that a trade group like ours existed for the sole purpose of helping technology companies make inroads into these markets. So we saw that there was this sort of diffuse ecosystem. These a lot of companies that were out here, a lot of stakeholders on like sort of different sides of this ecosystem, and that what they really needed was a group and a nonprofit like ours sort of really, I think, fits the criteria of someone who could be successful at doing that. To say, let's bring a center to this. Let's bring all these people together. There's lots of companies that might be doing meetups and happy hours and things like that. But they tend to do that because they're trying to get their own brand awareness out. They've got their own motives for doing that. And AMT is doing it specifically because it's our charter and our mission to do that. And so, the idea of coming out here in the first place was to be able to provide a center for the manufacturing technology community here in the capital of, technological development, in Silicon Valley.
Hmm. What specifically does it mean to do ecos? Like, so for you to become a center, how do you start doing that?
Well, I would say a lot of it is like specifically just meeting people, letting them know what it is that we're all about, figuring out what they need, and making those connections one by one. And over time, it starts to be woven into a pretty rich fabric. That and so a lot of it is just, frankly, it's just getting out there, meeting people, figuring out what it is that they're working on, figuring out what it is that they need, and seeing if we can make those connections, and then also doing a lot of hosting of networking events, sponsoring a lot of events that other people are putting on. Yeah, just basic stuff like that. I mean, I would say it's just really about establishing those personal connections and getting them all involved the in the ecosystem in a bigger way.
Gotcha. So can you tell me, like, in a concrete example, a company comes to you, they're an early stage startup that wants to sell their product into industry.
Mm-hmm.
How does it look?
Right. So it happens all the time. Like on a, this is definitely happening several times a month where I'm interfacing with companies like that, and it really depends on what they need. We could help them get access to investors that might be interested, depending on where they
So
are.
you would make those connections. You'd be like, these are some investors that might be a very good fit for you given the domain you're trying to go into.
That's right. And then the profile of the investor and what specifically they're interested in as well.
Yes, definitely.
If they decided to become a member of our organization, we could connect them with our research and analysis team so that they could understand the market landscape a bit better than they might be able to figure out on their own. Startups, especially at an early stage, they don't necessarily have all the time to develop product and develop go-to-market strategy and to do all the market research that they need to do. And so any way that they can sort of supplement that, could be beneficial.
What would that look like more specifically? So you're doing to do the market research for them, you help them find similar companies that are doing similar products, and then for those similar products, which ones, how, like, their approach into entering the market, if they were a subscription based, if it was selling it outright, if it was like what kind of approach works well to kind of get into the market, or what are some specific things for that?
We do have a lot of information on that, and it would be different depending on their needs. I mean, we do have some off-the-shelf data products, right? Like in additive manufacturing, for example, we develop reports and we've got a database of things that if you just wanted a sort of a standard data cut, you could have that. But we have a team of analysts, and AMT members basically get like half days worth of research requests for free. So if there is a specific question that they want an answer to, and that looks like it's going to fit, nicely into one of those, like a half day's worth of research from a member of our analyst team, then they would work on it in that way. If it's bigger than that, then we charge sort of at cost, and since we're a nonprofit, to be able to go and dig deeper into that. In some cases, then we'll actually treat it more of like a consulting engagement what we call a sort of a business review day, or there's other ways that we can define those projects to say, okay, this might be several days or a few weeks worth of research, and sometimes we do that for other government and non-government agencies that want to leverage our expertise, and then we sort of do it as sort of like a consulting project, if you will. But most of the time, it's just engaging our analysts, saying these are the questions. These are a question or some questions that I want answers to, and can you look at the proprietary data that you all have and have been collecting, as well as the other data that you have access to? Our analysts live and breathe in this space, and so they have I think a it's maybe easier for them, and they can be sort of more resourceful in terms of where they're looking than anybody that might not be as well versed as um, not have that same domain expertise in our space. The other thing
Yes,
that
they
you
know their
mentioned
stuff,
is
so
that
they're very fast at it. Yeah.
they know their stuff, and we've seen it all. We've dealt with in any given year we're dealing with dozens of companies, and um, staying abreast of the changes in the market landscape and across a variety of categories. And so it could be like you said, oh, can you give us a list of companies that have that are direct competitors to us? But that doesn't really tend to be the type of question that we're addressing. It would be a more nuanced question than that. Something that they're needing the type of opinion that someone that is well versed in the overall market landscape, that they would be able to answer.
Would you give me an example of one of those questions or a few of them, just so I can get a better sense? Like, I know it's case by case, but like, given scenario A of this one company, they came with this question, and that was one that took a half day of an analyst's research or time.
It's a bit difficult to describe, because we're getting these things all the time to just come up with just one. But an example might be like in we the how do we divide up our sales territories, right? We're selling this product in this market. This is our ideal buyer. We've got these 5 salespeople that we hired. How do we divide up the sales territory in a way that it's going to be most fair to them, to give them the equal opportunity?
Gotcha. That's a cool question. And then, so then you have some analysts go and run some analysis, and then they come up with these are roughly the same size segments in terms of value, and it's fair for this kind of thing.
Yeah, and we also have been, collecting sales and shipment data on other manufacturing technologies for a long time. We collect both like census and IRS data that would allow us to look at the number of target customers for that company, being able to divide them up by region in that way, to be able to say, well, here's there's the rough number of prospects, and if you divide them this way, then everybody's got more or less like a fair share. So that's an example of a question that would provide concrete. It's well defined. It provides concrete value to the business that's asking it. And then it both leverages the unique proprietary data that we have, along with other publicly available sources. But it really takes our analysts' knowledge of the market landscape to really pull all that together in a way that's going to provide a good outcome for the person that's asking the question.
Definitely. So I'm struck by. So are you the only person in the office in San Fran or in Oakland? Or are there?
No, currently I'm the only person here in the Bay Area.
But your analysts will be somewhere kind of concentrated in the U.S. or
Yeah, so
you,
our headquarters is in McLean, Virginia.
yep. Okay. And then so what I'm struck by is if it's up to you to form relationships with companies to try to get to know them and their problems and where they're at, there's only one of you and there's a lot of companies. I think it might be so you can figure out and kind of suss out the problems and the questions that they should be asking you. But how would someone know if they should come to you with a question? Like what kinds of what's the space of questions that you generally would be useful for the company to come to you from?
Well, for a lot of people, I might be their first encounter with AMT.
Mm-hmm.
And I engage with a lot of companies in, a lot of different ways, depending on, what's going on around here.
Mm-hmm.
But, ideally, they're going to see the value in AMT membership and they're going to become an AMT member. And then they have access to our member services team, in addition to the other branches of our organization, like our international tech centers, our
Mm-hmm.
event staff, our content teams, and things like that. And then, they would engage with the organization directly. They wouldn't necessarily need to come through me for all of those requests. They can just engage sort of the larger, the mothership, so to speak.
Yeah, I see. You're the entry point. You're the face to them, and then they engage with the larger organization once they kind of see the value in the organization for them in their case.
Right, and
Awesome.
I might have several conversations with a company before they determine that membership is right for them. But
Mm-hmm.
again, it's like a lot of what we're doing here in the Bay Area is just getting involved in the community, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's not like I'm not necessarily just here to try to convert members. I'm here to try to create some uh, gravitational pull for the manufacturing technology,
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem at large. And as time has gone on, more people are just aware of me and of AMT, and
Mm-hmm.
then they sort of more self-select, say, "Oh, this is something that I know I need to be in." I'm needing to go to IMTS this year, and so becoming a member will make that more cheaper for me, or there's a lot of reasons that they might say, okay, now's the reason that I want to become a member.
Mm, gotcha. How does membership work? Is it like a yearly subscription for companies based on their size, or how does
Yeah,
it?
so you've got to apply, and then you need to be there's like a review process. It actually is it takes a while. There's like a committee that reviews all the applications that come in.
Mm-hmm.
Seldomly do we, I explained the criteria already. I mean, you need to make a manufacturing technology. You need to be based in the United States, or at least have some business entity in the United States. And then yes, there are dues, and the dues are based on revenue. For most startups, that puts them in a dues class that pays $500 a year. So it's
Hmm.
really reasonably priced, and then that scales up. I think our highest paying dues class would be for like multi-billion-dollar corporations, and even the dues class for those types of companies are very reasonable. They're about 22,000, 20, yeah, like $22,000 a
Mm-hmm.
year, and then it scales between that. So like for most companies that are startup size or early stage, they're either paying $500 or $1,500 a year to be members of our organization.
Gotcha. Okay. And so, with you having all of these different members, imagine in addition to providing them services, I'm imagining, yeah, so you can kind of advocate on their behalf. And you mentioned that you can do this through policy, but if policymakers come to you, is there any other types of advocacy you do for these groups?
I would say that so certainly it's I wouldn't call it lobbying. Um, I would say it's actually more policymakers come to AMT for
Hmm.
advice, and we do have like a position paper that's called the Manufacturing Mandate that can be found on our website, where it kind of lays out pretty plainly our position on um, the policies that would make sense for the manufacturing community and the manufacturing technology community. And in a nutshell, what we really think is that a strong manufacturing ecosystem is vital for the country, and a key component of that is a strong manufacturing technology industry. Certainly, where we are today, where we're needing to reinvigorate the manufacturing, our industrial base, a way to do that, a
Hmm.
way that must be done, is through the application of technology. And then there's a bunch of other not a bunch. I think there's only four sort of main bullets in that paper. It's not very long. I think it's just 7 or 8 pages long, and that is what we would basically give to any um, uh, aid, or anybody that was wanting to understand where we fall on that, and then we're happy to go deeper in it. The fact of the matter is, manufacturing is seen as, it's got a lot of bipartisan support, so there's not necessarily a lot of lobbying that needs to get done. It says, oh, you need to do manufacturing. Both Democrats and Republicans, they are behind this issue. um, that's not the reason that there hasn't been more action there. So we're there. We're well known as a resource um, uh, if policymakers need it. I would say the
Hmm.
other area of where we act on behalf of our members and for industry would certainly be on the education side.
Hmm.
Lack of skilled labor, lack of labor, period, but certainly lack of skilled
Hmm.
labor is is if it's not the top cited concern of our members and our members' customers, it's top two, top three. And so we work directly with industry and with the education providers to create the curriculum to create these skilled laborers. So we've got a program called Tooling You, which is the educational curriculum that helps um, qualify skilled machinists. We're working on similar things to create um, qualified users of additive manufacturing equipment, and also um, in other sort of technology areas as well. And so we work with both industry credentialing bodies like NIMS, and then with the Council of Community Colleges and Trade Schools, so that there is this um, industry-backed, um, transferable curriculum and certifications that can be used by any educational institution, and then any person that gets that certification can then go anywhere and say, I've got the gold standard when it comes to being able to be able to walk into your environment and already be able to provide value. Um, so in addition to that, to like the sort of the certifications that we're working on, uh, were very involved in earlier education, and in providing opportunities for kids as young as in elementary school to learn more about the manufacturing industry and manufacturing technology. And so during IMTS, we put together what's called the Student Summit, where between 20 and 30,000 students are bussed into Chicago to participate in programming to see the event and learn about the career paths in manufacturing, which I think, not a lot of people know what that's all about. Certainly the manufacturing industry has an image problem when it comes to attracting young people into its ranks. And this
Hmm.
is a way that, we're actively working against that, is to actually provide exposure and to allow as many students as possible to see with their eyes just how cool and exciting and high tech the industry actually is. I think that there's this, feeling that these are, dirty, dangerous jobs where you come home covered in grease and you're sitting in, an environment that there's no natural light and things like that. And that, that's not really the case. There's, um, there's so much more than that, so much more variety than that. And the reality is a lot of these jobs are computer oriented, high tech. It could be working with robots. All of them involved critical thinking, and all of them, I think, can engage people and engage young people in a way where what they want. They want to make a contribution. They want to feel like they're a part of something. They want to, use their critical thinking skills. And the manufacturing industry offers a lot of those types of jobs. And frankly, at a time when um, any young person that knows stuff about computers would be able to walk in and make a huge impact. And so, really, what's missing is just um, the awareness of knowing, what kind of jobs are there. A lot of these are really high paying jobs too.
Gotcha. Well, so you mentioned at the conference that you have these events where you have the things where you bring the kids in to see.
Mhm.
What
Yeah,
was the response like?
the student summit. Oh,
Yes,
it's always extremely positive. I mean, it's super cool. I mean, who doesn't like to see a bunch of, high tech machinery and robots and stuff like that? Not to
for
mention,
sure.
being among, a lot of peers that are all sort of galvanized around the same thing. I mean, it's, for anyone that's like interested in STEM type stuff, again, like critical thinking, making things, like this is all really right at the cross section of all of those things.
For sure. What kinds of things do you show them to get them excited? Like specific examples. You show them like a robot arm doing something really cool, or what? Like, how do you get them excited?
Yeah, I think, I don't know what for sure is going to be at the IMTS Student Summit this year. And we call it the Smart Force Student Summit. But there will be exhibits like that based on our exhibitors, in addition to there just being like some um, uh, to let them understand what kind of educational paths would get them in those jobs, and also sort of some kind of like job board or job programs. There would be a lot of exhibits about the different technologies they're working. I mean, that's one thing about INTS. It's where you go to see the robots and CNC machines and metal forming equipment like actually in action. It's
Hmm.
over 1 million square feet of exhibition space, and it's where all of the manufacturers they actually bring the machines, and they're there and they're working and they're doing their thing. So
That's
yeah,
super cool.
I would say it's very interactive, and it's it's where you can actually see the stuff working.
Hmm. And so so AMT has been a lot around for 120 years, and you were saying,
Mhm.
how long has IMTS been going on?
I think close to 70 years.
That's awesome. So,
Mhm.
how long have these the student summits and these kind of initiatives been going on?
That's a good question.
Because I'm
I
wondering
don't.
specifically if there's any like follow up. Do you track how many kids go where they were high schoolers and then they chose a career path that leads to something similar to being a skilled machinist or whatever? It'd be interesting if you had any idea of kind of the matriculation you see.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not my area of expertise.
Hmm.
But our vice president of Smart Force, Greg Jones, might have some information on that about. I'm sure there's got to be countless success stories of students that got turned on to this at the IMTS um,
Yeah.
Smart Force Student Summit, and then went into a career path in that way.
Hmm. And you mentioned, so you're making curriculum for community colleges at AMT. Can you tell me more about the role of community colleges and the importance in all of this, in getting manufacturing going? And it's just, I think it's often
Sure.
underappreciated, probably.
I think it definitely is underappreciated. Well, so these are skills-based programs. What you're coming out with, there's some skills. In this case, it's like learning to operate a CNC machine, which is a complicated piece of equipment. It's expensive, and but I think in 6 to 9 months you can come away with this certification. So 4-year colleges, they're not really set up to address the skills gap in the same way, right? Because I mean, what 4-year programs are offering you is a much more well-rounded type of education that's preparing you for something else. And so the benefit of the network of community and technical colleges is, one, they're everywhere. Um, Two, they tend to be in a very tight feedback loop with the needs of the community that they're operating in, right? So, and a lot of time, the educators in those schools are also coming from that community. And so they tend to be more sort of like in a better, um, to better serve the needs of the community where they're located, because of those two reasons, right? The business community can say, we need more CNC machinists. And I say, okay, well, let's go ahead and put in this program. And they look for the educators within the community to say, like, hey, you seem like you would be a good fit to be able to, you know, train these students using, this program and, help them find jobs. So, yeah, I would say that it tends to be overlooked and underappreciated, but is a very important resource when it comes to addressing the skilled labor shortage that we have in our country, for these type of technical roles like learning to operate a CNC machine or program a robot or implement a lot of the technology solutions that um, small and medium-sized manufacturing companies really need to move to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they're
Yeah,
also cheaper. It would, I've got
that's
to
an important
mention
thing.
that
Yes.
as well, right? I mean, it's got to be an order of magnitude less expensive. And because you're also going in, like these programs at community colleges exist because there's this need in the market to satisfy them. You tend to be going into one of these programs because you've got a job waiting for you on the other end. So financially, it makes a lot more sense, to go into one of these trade programs for like all of the reasons that I just mentioned.
Mhm. Yeah, it strikes me. So I am speaking out of my knowledge here, but in Europe, like Germany and Switzerland, it seems like a lot more people go into trades where they become skilled machinists and this kind of thing. And in the United States, it seems like a lot more people go into college, 4-year programs, where, I mean, and study a variety of things, but it makes it so that we have a lack of, I don't know, good tradespeople, whether it be plumbers or electricians or people demand CNC machines, which it's just it's interesting where we are because of this.
Yeah, so I would say that's another thing that we advocate for through the manufacturing mandate and through our smart force development program is more apprenticeship programs, which is what Germany in particular has, and it's really seen as a model of what successful apprenticeship programs look like. We don't tend to have that here, and I'm not really sure how it happened, but it really seems like, our parents' generation, when it came to laying out the career options that they encouraged, their kids, people that are our age, the trades, manufacturing, was not really seen as a direction that they wanted to steer, their kids into. What does that look like? Well, now, plumbers are making over $200,000 a year, right?
That's
Because
nuts. I didn't realize that.
there's so few of them, and they're always in demand. So, and they own their own business a lot of the times, right? They're thriving, and meanwhile, there's sort of a glut of architects and lawyers and things like that, all of the sort of like jobs that you push people into, and history majors and everything else that might not be able to find the same job. And so um, for whatever the reason, it didn't really serve us very well to sort of push a lot of people through 4-year liberal arts programs where maybe there wasn't jobs for that, students taking on like a lot of like loans and things like that, where
Yeah.
there is just a big need for people in the skilled trades, um, and so it's a monumental problem that we're dealing with now.
hmm And so the idea with this is to try to help this problem by, I mean, you guys at AMT are kind of attacking this on all fronts, where you're trying to increase the number of youth that go into this, and then also educate people that are going into community colleges. Um, and then,
And then also just more broadly bring more attention to the industry, and show
Mhm.
that it's cool, and that it really should be considered by um, you know by anybody, by the best and brightest that have more options,
Mhm.
that they should always look at this industry as
Gotcha.
a place that
Yeah,
they can thrive.
you are right with it. I mean, like when I was in high school, like being a machinist or something, that was like never considered. It was like, which engineer do I want to be or whatever. It's just interesting. It's interesting, all of this. And so part of the way also to fix it is to increase the technology, like the technology, use more sophisticated technology to try to make up for this labor gap as well. So this is part of
Mm-hmm.
the reason to try to connect all of these different companies together so they can be as efficient as possible, which helps remedy the labor shortages and this kind of thing. Is that a fair way to think of this?
Yeah, I definitely think that there is. I mean, there's a common refrain is this fear of robots taking people's jobs in the manufacturing industry. I think that no one really takes this serious, because I think that we're looking at 500,000 open jobs right now. So it would be one thing if all of those jobs were full, and the factory owners were looking at automation as a way to reduce their costs on personnel. But they can't fill those jobs. And so, automation is really seen as a necessity, simply to keep operations running, not as a way to replace people.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I mean, these jobs need to be filled one way or another. If it's possible to fill them with robots, then they need to do as a matter of necessity. They're not looking at it as well, how can I get, how can I reduce my bottom line by firing some people and putting some
Robots.
automation in that's not, I, I, I don't
It's a
really think
narrative
that
in a sense.
it's
Not
it's a narrative that
necessarily.
doesn't really fit the reality of the situation, which is there are not enough people to fill the jobs that we have. Both people and automation are needed.
Yep. So one thing that I have heard as a critique to this, and I haven't heard a good response yet, because I've heard this repeatedly in the podcast, that there are not the people for the jobs. And one thing that was brought up to me, which I thought was quite interesting, and I'd like to see your response, is a lot of the jobs that are open are very undesirable jobs. They pay low. It's really hard work. It's like not fit for humans in a sense, so no one is doing it. Like, but I don't know if this is a fair critique. But what do you think of this? Like they're just
So
miserable jobs, basically. So no one wants them.
that could be true, and but that wouldn't be unique to the manufacturing space either, right? I mean, there's a lot of
Definitely.
it sort of jobs at that level where that are available to people that might not have a lot of skills, but just as a quick insertion, those skills
Hmm.
are through these community quality programs in like less than a year you can, and for not a lot of expense, you can really skill up and get one of those better jobs. But the manufacturing industry has historically been seen as a sector where someone without a lot of education or skills could get a job, right?
Hmm.
Some of
And
those
rise
jobs
too.
and rise, and I think that that's actually a good observation as well. It's like, there's so much opportunity for, critical thinking type people to be able to say, we can improve this by doing this, and that's that's what it's all about. But yes, there are a lot of jobs. There are a lot of jobs in the manufacturing industry that need to be filled at every level, from
Oh,
those shitty jobs that you described that nobody wants, but are available for those that might not have a lot of other options that would maybe be the same thing as someone working in a warehouse or in fast food or in agriculture or something like
it's
that.
like that level of job. Yeah.
But all, up to CNC machinists, robot programmers, people in sourcing and procurement, people in accounting roles, sales roles, uh, service people, all the way to executive function. I mean, like, we're looking at an industry that needs people at every level of that. So it's
Hmm.
hard to, like, every time that we talk about the labor shortage in manufacturing, I like to bring that up, that this is an industry that's hungry for talent at every level, at every skill level as
Hmm.
well. And so, yeah, I mean, the automation has always come for those, difficult, dull, dangerous, dirty tasks. And
Yeah,
so, certainly we would like to see those being automated away. You say no one wants those jobs. Well, someone might want that job if they didn't have any other options, but ideally, those types of dirty, dull, dangerous work, we would like to automate that away,
for sure.
and it's happening.
Hmm. One thing that struck by, so I just moved to San Antonio, Texas, and I've met a lot of people here in the couple weeks that I've been here. And one thing that has shocked me, or been an interesting thing to me, is I've met a lot of people that they're effectively in trades like we're talking about, and they are like skilled machinists, or it's very interesting to meet so much of this coming from the Bay, where everyone was involved in knowledge work, to coming here, and it's like this person is incredible at running this big machine for I don't know, making metal things, like, or doing high tech welding or things like this. Um, but is there a lot of welding? I mean, is there a lot of manufacturing going around in the Bay, or like regional differences? I guess. What do you see?
I wouldn't say that there's a lot, but there's a fair amount. Uh, Certainly in agriculture,
Hmm.
biotech, um, those types of industries. But then, with the burgeoning space industry and EV industry here, there are a lot, an increasing amount of that type of manufacturing as well. So it's not like, if you sort of look at a map of where manufacturing is located in the United States, it's not one of the major. areas of concentration, but I think it normally charts, right?
Hmm.
But why AMT is here is because it, it's the tech itself, right? I mean, so many technology companies come out of here, and we know that a lot of those are looking at or could be applied to the spaces where we operate in.
Hmm.
And that has really, borne out. I've probably engaged with about 100 different companies in the last 3 years that, are focused on, if not exclusively focused on manufacturing and industrial, see that as a key vertical that they focus on.
Gotcha. It seems to me like it's an effort to improve the technology to help replace the gap, or help reduce the pain of the gap in the manufacturing industry, the gap of skilled workers, this kind of thing. So it's a nice ability to kind of leverage all the technology that comes out of the Bay, and try to have it be useful in different industries that need machining and want to automate as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just sort of like the mindset that this part of the world is known for, right?
Yeah. How do you kind of going a little bit bigger picture? How do you think about manufacturing in the U.S. with other countries that have, say, like a lower GDP per capita, where they can ask their workers to work for less and this kind of thing?
What I don't understand, like what are you wanting me to comment on?
I guess how does it affect our manufacturing industry? Because I imagine it makes it harder to build things here because the cost of labor here is more expensive, and it's just an interesting pull on companies, I think, in the U.S. Maybe.
Well, the trend of outsourcing our, manufacturing to lower cost countries is, it's not new. In fact, it looks like we're actually at a very, transitionary, point in this cycle where, that trend shows signs of reversing, or
Hmm.
at least, um, parts of that
Slowing.
trend are all of it is slowing, some of it is reversing, as a result of the global supply chain disruption during COVID, global political tensions, tariffs,
Definitely.
wars, and then the fact that um, the it's getting more expensive, as the those countries continue to develop. There are other opportunities, and the middle class grows. They're $1 to $3 an hour is no longer acceptable. Um, but this didn't start yesterday. This has been going on for decades, and I think it was a strategy that was dictated by short-term financial thinking,
Hmm.
mostly on the part of large companies that were owned not by people that really understood manufacturing, right? They're really wanting to find returns for their shareholders, and as a result, were willing to chase near-term financial gains, and that often pushed them to, source their uh, products, or as parts of their products in places like China.
Yeah.
What that effectively did is, in order to do that, huge investments, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, were invested to develop that infrastructure in in China, in other low cost countries. And so, while we did get cheap goods for a time, we have effectively subsidized the industrial development of a lot of these countries that we now see as we never saw them as competitors before. So it's sort of this like outpost, but now we sort of see them in a different light. And now we are grappling with what that means. And for the large companies that did invest hundreds of millions of dollars over time in helping China or other low-cost countries tool up, and now they're grappling with either the geopolitical turmoil or the fact that ports closing down due to COVID doesn't work for them, right? I mean, if you look at all of the companies that have half-built inventory that they've been sitting on for months and months, they realize that investment was maybe short-sighted. And the other thing that did, when you take the manufacturing contracts that could have gone to domestic suppliers, a lot of those companies have gone out of business, or they don't have that same capability. They did not adapt the capability that they did have to keep in sync with the needs of these corporations. So the result is a lot of the stuff that we currently import, we can't make it anymore. Some of those things we wouldn't want to make. I mean, there's a lot of sort of low cost, low value goods that, I think that we don't want those manufacturing jobs. And I think that there's something to be said, if you look at, the impact that the United States and in other Western countries sourcing their manufacturing production to China, it lifted many people out of poverty in these low-cost countries, and I think that can be seen as a benefit.
Definitely.
But if you're looking specifically on the impact that it had on our country and our country's ability to make stuff, it had a very negative impact. And it's not, if it's something that took over 30 years to create, it's not something that you can undo in a short amount of time. And like I said, a lot of the companies that might have been there to help us deal with this problem, they're no longer in business, or they have not adapted or continued to progress in the way that is going to make them alternatives to where they might be sourcing these products today. So it's a complicated problem. I wouldn't say it's like completely bleak. I think in a lot of areas the United States leads the world in manufacturing. Certainly OEMs are not sourcing their most sensitive, high-tech jobs or products or even components of their products to China. The reason being is they're rather unscrupulous when it comes to intellectual property. So the United States continues to be a leader in many areas of manufacturing, but the breadth of our capability and the amount of manufacturing, just the capacity is nowhere near it would have been had we not outsourced so much of our manufacturing to low-cost countries over the last 30 years.
Yeah, it seems to me it's like we have it's a specialization mindset where like you become this highly special, like all the different types of doctors, for example, there's like one who works on one part of you and one who works on another. And we kind of take this as a society and go, we're going to be the designers of everything and the makers will be somewhere else. And so they're going to specialize in that. We'll specialize in this. And I don't like the US is large, and that leaves out a lot of people probably that are not in like, I don't know, the roles of designing things, not the engineers, not the, I don't know,
Yeah,
these kind of things.
there's a line of thinking that tends to think that as countries, economies evolve, they become more service oriented and they can become less reliant on manufacturing. Um, Similarly, they become, as they become more industrialized, they become less reliant on agriculture. And when they
Mm-hmm.
become more developed, still they can become less reliant on making things in their country, and they have more of a service oriented economy, and then they can import all those things. I think that actually had a contingent, and certainly there was a lot of people that were promoting this mindset over the last few decades, really as a way to justify the high level of importing that we were doing and moving of the manufacturing overseas. I don't think that
Mm-hmm.
there's really anybody in the aftermath of COVID that thinks that anymore.
Gotcha.
You know,
And so
that
that's
that
making,
that
oh,
that that blew up, and it showed, where hardly anybody, no one really cared about manufacturing or supply chain. And then all of a sudden, everybody did when they couldn't get toilet paper or N95 masks or medication. And then, all of a sudden it was just like, oh, wait, yeah, no, manufacturing is part of our identity as Americans, making stuff made in America. Like, this is something that's really important to us. And then, they realized that that didn't really jive with what seems to be practically an American pastime, which is buying cheap crap from Asia. So it's like, the incongruency in this situation is, I think, really come to light. And people, I think, if there's a time for us to fully reckon with the impact of the impact that giant corporations have made on our industrial base, um, in the name of profit, it's now. Now is the best time that we've ever had since this trend became commonplace for us to reverse it and really invest in prioritizing our industrial base as something that's important to our economy and our safety and security.
what does that look like? Is it entirely investments, like government investments or venture capital investments into industry, or how do you imagine that occurring?
Well, it has to happen in several ways, and again, it's really difficult to, you know, it would take a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me, probably a few of your podcasts to really be able to describe it well, right? It's not a simple problem, but and then it's certainly, you could look at AMT's manufacturing mandate that I think would, provide some broad strokes. One thing is that, you know, countries like China unfairly subsidize the cost of their manufacturing so that they're not truly, we're not competitive with China. One reason is because, the Chinese government will subsidize jobs, making them cheaper. So we don't do that. And so yes, I mean, there is the avenue for the government to be able to, um, that, match that in some way, to be able to make it, to offset that non-competitive nature of China, making it cheaper for American companies to do business here as opposed to elsewhere.
Yeah.
That's been on the table for a long time. There's a lot of things that the government can do through their tax policy for manufacturers that would implement that. One of the problems is that they tend to change the tax code like every 4 years, And
Basically every presidential cycle kind of thing, or
yeah,
if one party is dominant in one sector of the government.
They're changing it all the time, and that's not good for manufacturers who tend to need to plan over a long term. And so if they don't really know, what their taxes are going to be, it's difficult for them to make investments.
I see.
The other, aspect of this is that um, we just plain don't have the infrastructure that's needed to be more competitive. So we need to help the existing manufacturers tool up. Um, we need to make it easier for people that want to start a manufacturing company to get in business. And then, what we've already hit on is, in order to do it, like let's say that we did want to repatriate, the 30% or so of imports that, we think that we either need or want to bring back. Well, if we've got a job shortage right now, think if we're gonna, basically add that much more demand, we need a lot more people. Um, and so, certainly making it more attractive for people to move into, to sort of go into also the manufacturing industry. That's something that we need. Some of the ideas are, of course, like this apprenticeship program that we already spoke about, which Germany is a good model for, but there's also been talk of like a manufacturing core, like similar to like an American AmeriCorps, where, it's really focusing like on educators, but actually trying to get young people into into the trades, into the manufacturing industry in a similar sort of volunteer program that would get them exposure. I think that's a great idea as well. So there's a lot of things that we need to do. There's also just education. I mean, it's actually just not as cheap to do business in China as it was. But in thinking of them as not a trade partner, but as a competitor for manufacturing jobs, you need to understand that they have really taken a very long view on this. They have made very strategic investments, and have been very they've been building towards this moment, and we haven't been. We've been sort of not investing in the future of our industrial base in the same way. And we kind of have like an attitude that we're just the best, right? Like we're the best. We don't need to worry about that. But China's done a very good job of tailoring themselves to American companies in terms of being their manufacturing partners. And so we need to make it a lot more attractive to do business domestically, and certainly a lot of the responsibility for that needs to be put on the large corporations that started this trend in the first place. And it's basically their fault, and they I think need to play a very active role in investing in the industrial base that they want here now. Now they want it here. Now that they realize how fragile the global supply chain is, and what sort of impact that can have on them. And now they're looking around and saying, "Oh, where were all those great suppliers that we were doing business with 35 years ago? They're not there." Well, then the sort of the culture and supply chain right now is it's not one that's highly collaborative with suppliers. It tends to be really working to extract the lowest price from suppliers. It's the same type of mentality that pushed people to low cost countries in the first place. It seems like the antidote to that is to develop highly collaborative supply chains that are regional, that are developed in a way that is made to be responsive and innovative when it comes to making the stuff that these companies need. So you had sort of said, we design it here, we send it somewhere else to get made. I would say that, a successful future for us looks like we are collaboratively designing and making, with a very responsive and highly collaborative regional supply chain. That's the opposite of what we have had. And in order for things to be made cost effectively in a way that is very responsive to market demands, and I think a better fit for what the economy looks like today, which is not really mass production. It's I wouldn't call it mass customization, but it's definitely high mix, low volume. Then that says to me,
high mix, like custom. Wait, say
like
it again.
High mix of products in lower volumes. So
Okay.
I wouldn't call it mass customization. I don't, there's some areas where that terminology makes sense, but I do think, the amount of unique SKUs that manufacturers are creating is going up, and the average volume is going down. And that says to me is that, this is an opportunity for a completely new manufacturing paradigm, and one that sort of gets us back to regional supply chains and very deep manufacturer-supplier relationships where you're really relying on your manufacturers to reduce costs together, as opposed to going to them and being like, you need to just
give me this for as low as possible,
and we're gonna send
choose someone else
in Mexico or something.
Gotcha. What do you think from the perspective of individuals that are not like? I mean, I would like to help this in some way, but like I'm not the head of Apple or some large company. What can individuals do to kind of help manufacturing in the U.S. become more competitive, and like how can individuals help this rather than just wait on large companies?
Yeah, again, there's not an easy answer to that question either.
Oh, for sure.
And I think the biggest thing that I would recommend is just to, and I think the global supply chain crisis as a result of the pandemic has really done this, just open their eyes to how this all works, right? Be a little bit more mindful um, about what goes into making things, and just thinking through what it means when something is made. I don't even say made in America, right? But like the difference that goes into a product that is made regionally or made by a vertically integrated company that really cares about the manufacturing versus the type of product that you might see on Amazon, where there's like, it seems like endless variations of essentially the same thing at the same price point.
Yeah.
That is obviously, manufactured by a giant factory, and you are then like able to get it in a day, even though it came like from across the world. And so like my advice isn't like that every individual should like only buy American made products or something like that, but that might be where you arrive after thinking about it more. But just to try to, calculate in your head your consumption patterns and how that relates to, the entire supply chain and the manufacturing value chain, period. I don't think that, like, I would not be one to advocate that we try to make everything in America. There's a lot of things that would just make sense. We wouldn't be able to enjoy some things if they didn't if we didn't import them. But you might start to think about what are the things that it's worth it to you to spend more on, and make sure that they're sourced domestically, as opposed to the things that like you're always going to go for like the cheapest thing, because you can, because it's an option that's available to you, and just I don't know, just pay attention a little bit more about like what that means.
Hmm.
um, I think another thing that people could do would just be to try to learn more about, um, the manufacturing ecosystem that is near you, and think about it from the perspective of there are a lot of jobs that need to be filled by all skill level people, and that probably nearby you there's a lot of small businesses that are looking for people, and maybe somebody that that would be a good fit for. You can
Mm.
push them in that direction. I mean, I certainly do. It's like almost everybody that I know that's unemployed or underemployed, it doesn't matter what their background is. I'm always pushing them in the direction of the manufacturing industry for all the reasons that I already described. It's like you can make an impact. They're going to want
Hmm.
you. There's a lot of problem solving there, and if you're a problem solving type person, it's like there's not really a lot of better industries for you, just because it's such a problem rich situation.
Yeah.
Lots of opportunities to employ tech. um, so that would be another thing I would say. Just be a little bit more conscientious about your own consumption patterns and how that relates to um, manufacturing and supply chain. Just think it through a little bit more, try to have some more awareness, and then think about the fact that there's like 500,000 open jobs, and you might be that person, or you might know someone that would maybe be a good fit there, and all it takes is just thinking about it and sort of getting your eyes open that that is a possibility at all.
Hmm. If someone wanted to start a company or something and try to tackle some area of manufacturing efficiently here, say in robotics or something else, how would you go about tackling that? I mean, if you're not like, I say you don't have that much money to invest or this kind of thing, but you think you can, I don't know, one, I guess, how do you find a good area to improve local manufacturing? And then how would you go about that? I guess you could go about it the normal venture capital route, but maybe
Well,
it's slightly
I
different.
mean, as I said, I mean, just since I've been in this role for the last 3 years, I've engaged with probably 100 companies. Um,
Hmm.
and then, there are lots of old companies, some over 100 years old, that are working on it. It's such a big industry. It's pretty difficult to say, oh, this is how you
Hmm.
go about it, or here are the top 5 ways that you should go about it.
Yeah.
Suffice it to say that at every level, whether they just be sort of entrepreneurs creating a manufacturing outfit, or companies that are creating some product and deciding that they're gonna make things in house, or they're gonna source it regionally. That I mean, it sounds like that's probably the most succinct answer to your question. It's like if you're gonna make something, figure out how to make it
In
regionally,
house.
and
Yeah. Or regionally.
or
Yeah.
in-house regionally. But there's going to be a lot of advantages that I think that um, for the first time, people aren't just thinking, oh, we'll make it in China. um, but but there is there's a lot of investment from both uh, venture capital, private equity, and even a lot of government money going into galvanize the space.
Hmm.
So I do think that if you do have an idea, um, there is investment available, and I think that that's going to expand. I think that more and more
Probably.
investors see this as an area worthy of investment. But again, I mean, it's like a significant percentage of the entire economy. So it's a little, saying like that kind of says to me that there's almost infinite ways that you could create a successful business in the space.
Gotcha. So, how would you think to go about learning about ways to make contribution in this space? Like, do you just go and ask what people's problems are, or you go talk to a bunch of manufacturing companies and see where there are shortages? Like, if you wanted to start a robotics company to help with this, how do you approach that? Like, how do you even find your problem domain?
Good question. I've never thought about it that abstractly before. So, but people tend to do it. I would say that there's a lot of companies in the space that are being founded that by people that don't have an industry background.
Mm-hmm.
But they only tend to get involved with us after that they decide, right? Like after they sort of identified the problem space that they want to work in. Well, AMT has a lot of content, both written and video. That's a good way to get started, right? Just to kind of like learn a little bit more. And then, of course, going to our trade show, which is going to be in September. I mean, as far as looking at the technology, there literally is not a better destination to learn about the technology. And I think by looking at what solution providers are doing, like how they're positioning their solutions, right? Like they're all very few people just like have a robot that's not doing anything in a booth. They're all working on some kind of
Yeah.
application, right? That I think gives a good sense of what they're doing. And then there's certainly a lot of people to talk to there as well. I'm reluctant to say, oh, just, go and talk to your regional manufacturer, go find the manufacturer people because they're busy. I mean, they
Yes,
probably
for
they'll
sure.
try, right? They'll go and find them, but I think that they're, and that they've got all sorts of problems. I'd be happy to, tell you about. But there's also what's called the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, the MEP program. It is a
Mm-hmm.
program under NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Every
Hmm.
state has an MEP, and that is a clearinghouse to help connect small, medium-sized manufacturing companies with um, technologies, programs, and services that they need to move their businesses forward, pooling resources for them, things that they might not be able to accomplish on their own. Um, at the state level, that's the best resource that anybody could have to learn more about what of the needs and just the character of their state, or if or you could look at sort of the surrounding states if you're in like a place that borders several states to really understand the problems and what sort of what drives that ecosystem, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they tend to operate in industry clusters, and so they tend to um, service and resemble the dominant industries that are near them. So, and then I would say, the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, I think looking there at like the MEP level and the Chamber of Commerce level is probably the best way to really understand like what the problem space is that you could,
Mm.
effectively get into. I would say, the other thing about starting a company in the manufacturing space is that you really want to look local. Um, it is not an industry that's spending a lot of time on the internet looking for new stuff or engaging with new products. And so if you do start a company, you're going to be wanting to be close enough to your first customers that you are really making sure that you're addressing the right problem in the right way. So I think by its very nature, you're going to want to start local. And if you're not in a place where there's a lot of manufacturing, then you're and you really want to get in the manufacturing space, then you're probably going to have to move.
Gotcha. Let's see. Going a bit big picture again, what do you predict is going to happen with U.S. manufacturing and global manufacturing in the next, like, I don't know, 2 to 5 or even 10 years?
Well, I think that like I have a pretty positive outlook. Like I think that, in the last like hour and a half, like I've really described the, this is a serious challenge, right? Like, it's been several decades in the making, and we've not really taken serious enough steps um, up into this point to offset the level of crisis that we're facing. Um, but I think that there's pretty good consensus of, that we need to change it, and that, a much more robust industrial base is not just important for our safety and our security, but it's also very important for the prosperity of our country as well. So I think that the conditions are right for movement in the right direction. And of course, as a technologist, I'm really bullish on the impact that technology can play in galvanizing and increasing the chances of success in this endeavor that we're working in. And certainly, I still believe that the United States leads the world when it comes to being uh, innovating and applying innovation in a way that can make a huge impact um, on the economy, commerce and in this industry in particular. So I'm very optimistic. I think it's going to be a huge challenge. It's also the challenge of what how would you might call it, like the orchestrating it all is a challenge. It's complex.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just you write $1 trillion check. You probably have to write 1,500 uh, 750 million checks or something like that, and all each one of those is going to have a sort of unique things. Sorry, it's getting around the time of day when all the
Food
dogs are
time.
out and barking at everybody. So yeah, I mean, but I think to sum up, it's a big challenge, but I think that the timing is right, and that there's not really like an acceptable alternative, right? Like we have to rise to this challenge because the alternative is that what we don't we rely on other countries to make our medicines, to create the um, microprocessors that are in the products that help us run our day-to-day lives, the raw materials that go into the rest of the stuff that we make. So
I think the dog is telling us to wrap up.
but to summarize what I just said is that um, I'm optimistic um, that if there's a silver lining to the pandemic, is that you know when there's been supply chain disruptions in the past because of like a tsunami or a hurricane or something like that, an individual or some uh, company supply chains might get disrupted, but they very quickly, tend to recover, and maybe they learned some lessons, but it hasn't been sufficient to really change the behavior of any companies really. But the pandemic shut everybody down and for a really long time, and it and it its disruption was so intense and so deep that it really gave everybody a taste of what it looks like for the fragile globalized supply chain that we have to just completely fail. And it forced a lot of people to reimagine what that would, what a better alternative would look like that wouldn't be so prone to failure. And what that also pointed to is that if you wanted to source more domestically, more regionally, that's not there, and it means that if people are going to need to create the supply chains that they want, right? Like, be the change you want to see in the world. I mean, it's sort of really have to actively create it, and there's a lot of pressure on our government um, to lead the way when it comes to putting that in place. So I see the government spending a lot of money on that. That whatever number they have in mind is probably going to cost twice or three times that. And I think the corporations have the wherewithal to actually make the investments and understand the importance of actually having, um, a responsive and strategically aligned regional supply chain. So that, and with all the technology that I get to see firsthand, I see the impact that it can make, and it's ready. It's not really like pie in the sky stuff. I mean, the technology is here, it's ready, and I think if there was a good pathway that was put in place by the government and by corporations to make it easier for small, medium-sized companies to get access to this technology, then I think that they can do it. So it's not a short-term project. It's probably going to take a decade for us to really see the impact of it. But I do think that as a nation that we're serious about it, and that we can do it. And one of the reasons that we can do it is that the alternative, um, not doing it, is unacceptable. So we have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Wrapping up, do you have any links or contact info that you would like to share with our listeners and watchers?
Sure. So our website is amtonline.org, and the IMTS website is, I think, just imts.com. And I am reachable at Ryan R. Kelly. Yeah, it's imts.com. So I am R. Kelly, RKELLY, at amtonline.org. Of course, you can also find me on LinkedIn. And anybody that wants to talk about this issue, about manufacturing technology, increasing domestic competitive in manufacturing, I'm happy to talk with you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's nice talking with you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Ryan Kelly. Thank you again to our founding sponsor, Open Robotics. See you next time.